President Trump, as he winds down his last few weeks in office, is considering preemptive pardons for all his adult children, including his son-in-law, Jared. What a mess. More as we know. Cue all the hand-wringing and gnashing of teeth today about a president using his power, his pardon power, his powers as president, to do something for a family member. Tell me more about how outraged we all are about President Biden's pardon for his son. President?
I guess it's okay when we do it. Good morning, Rise and Freedom. I'm Austin Peterson. You're watching and listening to the Wake Up America show, and we're on the For Liberty Network. Did everybody catch Brian Piotr last night on the homeschool workshop, teaching kids how to build a trebuchet? Next week, we teach them siege tactics. Yeah, we're going to teach your kids how to build a star fort and then how to assault a star fort. These are the kinds of things kids need to know. In the winter of 1804, Meriwether Lewis and William Clark made camp at Fort Mandan in present-day North Dakota with 33 men, a dog, and the explicit understanding that nobody was going to come help them if anything went wrong. They were 800 miles into unmapped territory. Temperatures were dropping to 40 below. And the next leg of the journey that they were on had no precedent and no guarantee of a good outcome. They didn't look for an easier way. There was no easier way. They covered 8,000 miles round trip, returned with the first detailed scientific record of the American West, and in doing so, they doubled the physical size of the United States. This morning, someone wants to build two 300-foot statues of those men on the Missouri River, privately funded, already at 1.4 million views, and a French foundry is already quoting the job to create these statues. We're going to talk about that, but first I want to tell you what the story is actually about, because it's not really about statues. It's about whether America really still knows how to do hard things and what it costs us all when the answer is no. This morning on Wake Up America, I've got 4 stories, and in some ways they're all the same story. 2 to 3% of the entire country is now on Ozempic or Mounjaro or some version of the same molecule. These are the GLP-1 drugs. This is more Americans than served in World War II, and most of these Americans who are on these drugs, they're not diabetic. They're just heavy, and they're impatient, and they'd rather pay for a quick answer than show the work. So we're going to tell you what the 5-year data actually shows, and why the man who loses 40 pounds on a needle and cannot tell you how his body changed is going to be right back where he started inside of 2 years. Because the hard part about losing weight and getting healthy was never taken off the table. The drug just charged you for the easy part, and then they left the hard part exactly where it was. And that same logic applies to immigration policy. And this is where things are going to get uncomfortable for some of you, because I'm going to make the libertarian case against open borders this morning. Not the conservative case, not the restrictionist case, the libertarian case. Friedman, Hoppe, Putnam. And the conclusion is that a generation of liberty-minded people took the intellectually easy path, and they treated a theoretical argument as if it described the real world, and they helped build the conditions under which freedom becomes harder to sustain. So you invite the third world and you become the third world. And that's the logical endpoint of the policy. And this morning, we're going to walk through exactly why. And speaking of liberty, people taking the wrong path, the Libertarian Party held its national convention in Grand Rapids. New Hampshire got disaffiliated. A delegate gave a Nazi salute, and Chase Oliver was blaming me on that. For that, I don't know why. The man who ran for party chair in a platform of dissolving the party got 31 votes and then got ejected from the building. We spoke to Jeremy Kaufman already about that. The 2020 LP vice presidential nominee, Spike Cohen, is here this morning to respond to all of that at 8:30. And I'm going to ask him the question nobody wants to answer, which is whether the Libertarian Party has any runway left at all. So that's the 4 stories we're going to talk about today: hard paths, easy shortcuts, and the bill that comes due when you make the wrong choices about what to do. Spike Cohen is here on the LP. Camellia is here at 8 a.m. Central. This is the Wake Up America show. Let's go. We've got bonus content for you guys. If you want to see our mini documentary today, then let's get those Rumble rants dropping. T-Mill22 is here. Drew Van Runkle, Thormock, Jimmy Joe Patty, CHEF30. I know you guys want to see the bonus content today, so drop some Rumble rants if you love the show, and if you guys want to see our mini documentary instead of our commercials when we go to our breaks, then head on over to forlibertyshop.com. That's the number 4libertyshop.com. And we're going to have a phenomenal show for you guys today. If you guys watch bonus content, it's so much more fun. So grab yourself a box of coffee like Camellia did yesterday, and Jimmy Joe Patty does every month, and give Byron Norris a big, quick kiss on the mouth.
What happens when you stop taking GLP-1 medications? Here's what you need to know. According to the CDC, around 40% of Americans are considered obese. One of the most effective treatment options for obesity is the use of medications known as GLP-1s. Many people wonder what happens to you when you stop taking GLP-1 medications for weight loss. Somewhere between 1/3 and 1/2 of the people who start taking GLP-1 medications eventually stop taking it. When you stop taking GLP-1 medications like semaglutide, the effects of the drugs will eventually wear off. That means your brain will no longer receive signals that reduce your appetite and your thoughts about food. Not everyone who stops taking a GLP-1 medication will regain the weight that they have lost. It's also possible that your blood sugar will increase some, especially if it was high before you started taking the medication. If you have questions about starting or stopping a GLP-1 medication...
Looks like she stopped taking the GLP-1 medication. Thank you, Byron Norris. Is that a fat joke? Yeah. We make fat jokes here. 9 million prescriptions for GLP-1 drugs were written in the fourth quarter of 2022. By 2024, the number of Americans taking these drugs specifically for weight loss had increased 700%. 2 to 3% of the entire country is now on Ozempic or Mounjaro or some version of this same drug. So for context, that's more Americans than served in World War II. And most of these Americans are not diabetic, right? They're just heavy and they're impatient. And then they saw that their buddy lost 40 pounds without changing what he eats. So now they want one too. And listen, I understand the appeal. I genuinely do. I hate math because you have to show your work. Given the option between the hard path and the easier one, I will stand at that crossroads longer than I should to decide what I need to do. But here's what I know about shortcuts. They work on tasks and they fail on development. So we use AI to produce this show. AI speeds up the format, but it doesn't build the understanding of what the words should say, right? This part still has to come from me. These are all my ideas, even if some of the words that I'm speaking right now are on a teleprompter and I wrote them with AI, or actually Colton wrote them with AI. What's up, Colton? They're still my ideas. If they weren't, if AI was just writing this entire thing, then the shortcut would eventually expose itself, right? Your math teacher made you show your work because the answer without the process is not comprehension. It's just a correct guess. Right, a man who loses 40 pounds on a weekly injection and can't tell you why his body changed or how to keep it that way, he's gotten the right answer, but he cannot show his math. And he's going to be right back to where he started inside of 2 years, which, as it turns out, is almost exactly what the research shows. So the New York Post reported a rise in this rare ear disorder that's being linked to GLP use. The list of problems that people are suffering from using these GLP-1 drugs is not short. Maybe you've heard about Ozempic face.
Pat Delahanty has seen incredible weight loss since using GLP-1 drug Zepbound to control his appetite.
Honestly, it's not hard to lose weight when you're not hungry.
Pat turned to the once-a-week injectable after suffering a heart attack in his early 30s, and years later, a blunt warning from his doctor.
Essentially, he said, you're probably not going to die of old age. You're going to die of another heart attack.
He is excited to have lost 40 pounds in just a few months.
Would you say it's been a game changer for you in your life?
Absolutely. I could have, no matter how dedicated I was, I don't think I could have walked off 40 pounds.
GLP-1s reduce your appetite and food cravings.
Yeah, you'll never walk 40 pounds off. See, he doesn't understand. He doesn't show his work because most people think that they can exercise, but you can never outrun a bad diet. That's the truth. And the list of disorders that people are having from this is, again, it's very long. Most people you have heard about Ozempic face. The drug removes fat without any editorial discretion, and your cheeks and your jawline are not exempt, right? Fewer people know about Ozempic ears, though, which is the same mechanism applied 30 centimeters lower. 30 or more pounds of loss, and your earlobes start to sag and thin. So plastic surgeons in New York are already treating this as a routine surgery to fix Ozempic ears. In 2024, a study in JAMA Ophthalmology identified a potential link between semaglutide, which is the active ingredient in Ozempic, and a condition called non-arteritic anterior ischemic optic neuropathy, which is a stroke of the optic nerve, potentially irreversible vision loss from these things. A follow-up review found 9 patients on semaglutide who had developed neon, or what's called retinal strokes. Now, 2 to 3% of the country on this drugs is not a small sample size, so we've got the numbers. A small percentage will become large absolute numbers pretty fast. In March of 2026, the American Academy of Orthopedic Surgeons presented data showing increased rates of osteoporosis and bone softening after 5 years on GLP-1s. Now, the 5-year data exists only because there are now people who have been on this drug for 5 years. 10-year data doesn't exist because nobody's been on this at scale for 10 years. Rapid weight loss on these drugs strips muscle right alongside fat, and muscle protects bone. If you lose both fast enough, you're lighter, but you're structurally worse off than when you started. The FDA was investigating hair loss reports in January of 2024. There's gastrointestinal effects, nausea, vomiting, diarrhea, abdominal pain. And now the ear, the face came after the stomach, the ear came after the face. The sequence, it's all moving in one direction, and we still haven't figured out exactly where we're going with this. When Tesla shipped the original Roadster vehicle, the battery was not replaceable. If it died, that was your car. You couldn't repair it. Your car was dead, and it was done. So the first buyers of the Tesla paid full price to discover that problem for all of us, so Tesla could fix it in the next version. So that's the deal with first generation technology. You get the first generation of the iPhone, you're going to deal with the problems of that. Somebody has to be the test subject, and the manufacturers prefer that it be you, the customer. So the GLPs right now, this is the first generation of these, and we're dealing with this at scale. Ozempic was approved for diabetes in 2017. The mass prescription of it for garden variety weight loss is about 3 years old. But the 5-year bone data exists only because patients have now been on it for that long. So the 10-year data will exist when patients have been on it for 10. So if you're taking these drugs, you're being sold the first production run of a car with a battery that cannot be replaced. And you don't know everything that's going to go wrong because not enough time has passed for it to go wrong yet. And the car analogy, there's a second problem with this. When you stopped driving the Tesla, the battery issue stopped being your problem. But a 2026 study out of Oxford found that people who stopped taking semaglutide returned to their original weight within 1.5 years, gaining back roughly 10 kilos in the first year alone. And with every cardiometabolic marker that had improved, deteriorating alongside the weight. So close to half of all patients quit within 12 months, meaning they absorbed every side effect. They paid for every objection, thousands of dollars. They thinned their bones. They lost the muscle, and only to end up back where they started, just older with worse joints and weird-looking earlobes. Now, your wife will notice if you get fat, okay? Your kids will notice. My wife is too polite to say anything. She would never say something that disrespectful to me, but I have other friends who will call me fat, and for that, I thank them. Thank you. To everyone who bullied me for being a fatty, I really appreciate that. That's the social cost, right? But the thing that actually does the long-term damage is that you're fat. You know whether the body in the mirror came from 2 years of showing up to the gym and eating right, or did you lose all this weight because you got a weekly injection, right? You can't lie to yourself about it the way you can kind of lie to everybody else about what you weigh. And the knowledge of having bought your way to an answer you didn't earn will compound. The research makes a point about this without meaning to. Even the doctors who are prescribing these GLP-1s tell you that you still have to lift weights, because I don't know if you've seen anybody who's on this who never had an exercise routine, but I'm not saying this to make a joke, but many of them look like Holocaust victims. because they don't have muscles and they lose all of this fat and their bodies just, they don't look good. So you wanted to look better, but you actually look worse. The hard part of being healthy was never taken off the table. You still had to go to the gym. And I'm not calling to ban anything. You know, these drugs have legitimate uses. If you have a legitimate medical need like that guy we just saw, of course you should have access to them. But if you're a man watching this show and you're overweight and you're thinking about the needle because another, you know, the alternative of that is another year of, you know, getting up early and working out or saying no to that piece of cake, like, you know, don't take the drug just yet, perhaps. Maybe wait for the second generation. Wait for the bugs to be worked out on somebody else's time and somebody else's weird ears, right? So in the meantime, go to the gym. I know you're going to hate it, but that's kind of the point. Last night was fight night here. Last night for karate before the summer break, and got me thinking about getting healthy, being a part of a community. Gichin Funakoshi was the man who brought karate from Okinawa to the Japanese mainland in the early 1900s. And he spent decades trying to convince people that what he was teaching was not exactly a fighting system. It was a path. The word do, like karate do or judo or aikido, do means way or a way of life, a method of becoming. Funakoshi wrote that the ultimate aim of karate lies not in victory or defeat, but in the perfection of the character of its participants. He also wrote this, what you have learned with your whole body, you will remember for the rest of your life. So think about that in the context of this conversation, right? We've talked about that guy. He took a weekly injection. He lost 40 pounds. His appetite was chemically suppressed, and then he lost the weight, but he learned nothing with his body because his body didn't do anything. There was no discipline. There was no grinding accumulation of mornings in the gym, no physical education in the sense that Funakoshi meant. In Karate Do, when we finish our classes, we repeat our Dojo Kun, and the first line of the Dojo Kun is seek perfection of character. Right? Bruce Lee put the same principle in different words. He said he didn't fear the man who had practiced 10,000 kicks once. He feared the man who had practiced one kick 10,000 times. So the body built by repetition is a different body. It's a different body than the one that is produced by a drug. One of them belongs to the man who built it, and the other one is on loan from Novo Nordisk, and it's due back when your prescription lapses. You're just borrowing it. Karate Do is not exactly all about fighting. It's about a daily encounter with your own resistance, right? The part of you that wants to stop, that negotiates, that's looking for an easier option. And you have to choose not to let that part of your win. That part win, right? The body is the arena where character is built or it's not built. There's no pharmaceutical pathway to perfection of character. Gichin Funakoshi, he trained until he was in his 80s. He didn't seek an easier way. He found that the hard way was the point. Seek perfection of character, be faithful, endeavor, respect others, refrain from violent behavior. Arigatou gozaimasu. Thank you. Amy J. Easley, telling it to you straight over there, says it's not just the risk of muscle loss, it's the risk of bowel obstruction, pancreatic issues, nausea, vomiting. Take it from a nurse. She would know. If you're just sick to death of anti-patriotic people in this country, people who hate America, then you need to go to forlibertyshop.com. How was that for a transition, guys? 4 out of 10. The 250th anniversary embroidered American flag polo shirt is on its way to me, the white one. I'm so excited about the white one. I want the white one. That's racist. I've already got the black one, and it has served me well, but on a hot day outside, I just want a nice, cool, light shirt, and here we have it. The 250th anniversary polo is a hot seller over at forlibertyshop.com. Byron Norris, he got himself one. Why don't you get like Byron and head to forlibertyshop.com? We got Byron blowing up the front page of forlibertyshop.com. Scroll down to the bottom, and check out some of our real customer stories. You can see Byron. He's got his beautiful hat on. He's got our hoodie. What else has he got there? Oh, yeah, our Thomas Jefferson whiskey glass. Look at that. For a second, I thought that was a real horse looking in the window there. Byron, that's freaking hilarious. Check out all of our 5-star reviews while you're there. Go to forlibertyshop.com. That's the number forlibertyshop.com. Maybe grab one of our awesome 1776 Betsy Ross Stars leather wallet. I got this one. This one's on the way to me, and I also got the white polo as well. Drew Van Runkle got himself the white polo as well. Yes, white power. Support the For Liberty Network and head on over to forlibertyshop.com or drop some Rumble rants. If you enjoy these kinds of conversations, just remember, nobody else is talking like this. So why don't you guys do us a favor and support the Wake Up America show? We're going to take a quick little break. When we get back, we're going to talk about Paul Anka and the Libertarian case against open borders. We still got Camellia Peterson 30 minutes from now, Spike Cohen an hour from now, so don't go away. We got a lot of great content for you. This is the Wake Up America show, and this is the For Liberty Network.'Tis the year of our Lord, 1801. President Trump Jefferson casts his gaze o'er the sovereign Potomac and beholds a most wretched spectacle upon the waters. From the cursed shores of Tripoli and the welfare coffers of distant Minnesota comes the brazen Captain Ilhan Omar, commanding her fleet of Barbary pirates. She demands her ransom, billions in reparations. Yet one instrument of fortitude suffices, a steaming chalice of Jeffersonian Java, bold and unapologetic from For Liberty Shop. No more tribute to rogues, he thunders, and dispatches the Navy and Marines to smash Omar's fleet asunder. Trump Jefferson stands triumphant as Omar's plunder meets the end it deserved back in Minnesota. Jeffersonian Java, the coffee that gives true Americans the courage to refuse tribute and rebuke fraud. Procure yours at forlibertyshop.com and make America caffeinated again.
In a city where businesses never sleep, the technology still crashes. When technology turns criminal, they send up the signal. He's not a myth, and he's definitely not your nephew who knows computers. He installs, he protects, he backs it up, he keeps your business online and out of trouble. Managed IT, security, cloud, support that actually answers the phone. Layer 8 tech. When your network breaks, he wakes. Call Drew before your tech needs a rescue signal.
George Washington spent 8 years making sure nobody knew where he was. Troop movements, secret dispatches. The man was a ghost. So when a barista leaned out a window and asked for his exact location in exchange for points they called stars, he looked at his flag and said, "I've already got my stars. 13 of them." Keep your dignity and your location intact. Grab a box of Washington's Revolutionary Roast at forlibertyshop.com.
Put your head on my shoulder, hold me in your arms, baby. Won't you squeeze me once? Show me that you love me too.
Good morning, Rise and Freedom. I'm Austin Peterson. Put your head on my shoulder. Welcome to the Wake Up America show. That was Paul Anka. He's an 83-year-old Canadian-born man and not a Republican. He went on Bill Maher's podcast this week, and he said that Toronto's crime rate has gone through the roof since the city took in over 400,000 immigrants.
Nicer.
We're not a homogenous nation here.
You look at homogenous nations, Asian, wherever, different cultures. We're not homogenous. That's been part of what we have to deal with, but that's the greatness of America.
Yeah.
But Canada is homogenous. Only now are they feeling it. A city like Toronto, there's over 400,000 immigrants.
Yeah.
And their crime rate has gone through the roof.
Yeah. No, Canada and England.
Oh, that's
both
a whole other.
You know,
8 million.
in my lifetime, and again, this is not a complaint, haters.
Yeah, right.
For the better, became way more diverse. I was in London for the first time in 1984. So I'm not saying it was better that it was an all-white city. I'm glad historically I got to see this thing back when, like, it looked like World War II Britain. The food was horrible. Everything was Brussels sprouts and some boiled
There is no
shit, like,
English cuisine.
Right. The television had 2 channels.
That's right.
You know, there was an England.
That's right.
And I'm not saying it was all better. And I think London now is like, I mean, it's like, I think 70% minority or something.
Yeah, yeah.
And
So we're 9 million.
so, you know, this is called progress.
That's
and
right.
I just, I'm
And they're
always,
leaving England, just like France.
but I'm always having to beg progressives to, like, enjoy the product you're selling, progress. They really hate progress.
Yeah.
You know, there's something about their psyche that's...
In 2019, I was in a debate with Brandon Tatum. Some of you know him. This was at Arizona State University, and I argued for returning America to a free immigration system. And I believed that rights belong to human beings and not to passport holders, that government-drawn borders were arbitrary, and the libertarian position on immigration was obvious from first principles. Now, I still believe that rights belong to human beings, but what I've stopped believing is that those premises require unlimited intake at unlimited pace with no vetting and no expectation of assimilation, because that conclusion doesn't actually follow from those premises. It actually follows from a neoliberal framework that found libertarian language useful for about a decade and then discarded it. Now, my own manifesto, published in Human Events in December 2024, lays out what changed, at least in my mind. The neoliberal framework treated immigrants as economic inputs rather than future citizens of a nation. But an economic input has no obligations. A future citizen, however, does. And I think every immigration debate in this country for 30 years has been run by people who want cheap labor on one side and want cheap votes on the other. But the question that neither side asks is, what does any of this do to the country as a country? Now, Statistics Canada, which is Canada's the government agency, it shows that Canada's violent crime rate hit its modern low around 2014 at roughly 1,000 incidents per 100,000 people. But by 2022, that number was 1,365. They had a 36% climb in 8 years. Over the same period, Canada went from modest annual immigration figures to admitting 483,000 permanent residents in 2024 alone, which was a record, on top of massive flows of temporary residents and international students that pushed the real population churn far higher. A 2024 data survey found 53% of Canadians now believe that immigration worsens crime and safety. But a year earlier, that number was 39%. So they had a 14-point jump in 12 months on Canadian opinions on what the cause of the crime was. So the data on whether individual immigrants commit crimes at higher rates than native-born Canadians, that is genuinely contested, and I'm not gonna tell you the science is settled on that when it's not. I have a hunch, but those are the facts, no matter what I think about them. 400,000 people added to one metro area in a compressed window strains housing, services, and the social infrastructure that holds a city together. New York City facing a lot of those same problems. Cities that are under that kind of strain, they produce conditions where crime grows regardless of who is producing it. And Paul Anka there, he didn't need a regression analysis. He didn't need to look up these numbers to see that. He grew up in Ottawa, so he knows what Canada used to feel like. So what he was describing in that interview with Mara is a loss of something that statistics take a decade to confirm after everybody with eyes already knows what happened. Now, in 2007, Robert Putnam, who is a Harvard political scientist, he wrote a book called Bowling Alone. And, as he would be, you would expect, he's a lifelong liberal. He published the findings from a 5-year study of social capital across 41 American communities, but he sat on that data for years without releasing. And he admitted that he did this publicly. The reason that he sat on it was that he knew what people like me would do with this data, and that made him uncomfortable. Here's what he found. The more ethnically diverse a neighborhood, the less its residents trust their neighbors. And this held for every race, by the way. This isn't just a white thing. Trust inside your own group went down alongside trust across groups. In San Francisco and Los Angeles, roughly 30% of people say they trust their neighbors a lot. In homogenous communities in the Dakotas, that number is 70 to 80%. Putnam called the effect hunkering down. Residents of high diversity communities withdrawing from collective life, they volunteer less, they give less to charity, they work on community projects less, they actually register to vote less as well. So the mechanism that what they do is these people withdraw. They don't get hostile, they don't fight with their neighbors in diverse neighborhoods, they just stop getting to know them. But a society of people who aren't getting to know one another, they cannot sustain self-governance because self-governance runs on civic trust the same way that an engine runs on oil. So the social capital that's required for a free society to function is not infinite, and it's not self-replenishing on demand. If you spend it down faster than it can be rebuilt, what goes with all of that is not just neighborliness, knowing your neighbors, but government expands to fill every vacuum that community leaves behind. Fewer volunteers, fewer donations. More and more people withdraw, and so the government steps in. Now, Milton Friedman put it plainly, you cannot have open borders in a welfare state. Free movement of labor only works as policy when the people moving are coming to work. The moment that the destination country attaches a benefit to arrive, you've built a taxpayer-funded subsidy for migration at whatever volume the subsidy can bear. Libertarian theorist Hans Hermann Hoppe took that foundation that Milton Friedman built, and he put something more precise on it, built his theory of it. And I think that it's worth following the logic because I think it defeats the libertarian open borders argument using libertarian principles. So the first move that Hoppe makes is a distinction that sounds simple, but it's actually pretty devastating when you get your head around it. He says that free trade and free immigration are not the same thing. So, and libertarians who treat them as equivalent are making a category error. So he says a container of steel, so because goods cannot move themselves, a container of steel from China cannot arrive in an American port without a willing American buyer on the other end. So every trade transaction is bilateral by definition. Both parties consented or the goods don't move. A person can cross a border without anybody on the other end consenting to anything. Right? Migration can be entirely unilateral. And that difference between free trade and immigration, that isn't just a footnote. This is the whole argument. In a fully private society, this distinction resolves itself. Every road, every building, every parcel of land would be privately owned, and no one arrives anywhere without the consent of the people whose property that they are crossing. Movement would be free because every step is governed by voluntary association. Of course, the problem is we don't live in that anarcho-capitalist utopia. We live in a society where an enormous amount of property like roads and schools and hospitals, parks, housing stock, it's publicly owned, and it was built with money that was stolen from taxpayers. So Hoppe's argument is that property is not unowned. It belongs, in the only morally coherent sense, to the net taxpayers who funded it. The state is not the owner. The state is the trustee. And the trustee's job is to manage that property in the interest of its rightful owners. If you open taxpayer-funded infrastructure to unlimited, uninvited arrivals without the consent of the taxpayers who paid for it, that's not freedom. It's the trustee giving away the beneficiary's property without their permission. Now, the Cato Institute crowd, they're going to say that Hoppe's framework on this proves too much. If taxpayers can use public property to exclude immigrants, they can use it to exclude anyone, and that hands the state a blank check. Well, Hoppe had an answer to that. Hoppe's answer is that the framework does not expand state power. He argues that it constrains it. He says that the trustee cannot exclude arbitrarily. It can only decline to extend the use of taxpayer property to people who arrive uninvited and unconsented. So the distinction here is between forced exclusion, which is the state preventing a private property owner from inviting someone onto their own land, and simply not opening public property to people who have no rightful claim to it. So a private employer could still hire an immigrant, a private landlord could still rent to one, but what the taxpayer does not owe is the road to their door, the school for their children, the emergency room visit, or the welfare check. And not because immigrants are bad, but because those things belong to the people who paid for them and were never put to a vote. So the only immigration that is consistent with this framework, or Hoppe's framework here, would be called invited immigration. And Jeremy Kauffman talks about this a lot, right? If you want to immigrate, if you want to immigrate to the United States, you need a specific sponsor, a specific person, a specific responsibility for costs. In other words, a form of insurance, so that there is some party here who would be responsible if that immigrant comes to the United States and, say, destroys property or kills someone or gets behind the wheel of a semi-truck, right? So because anything else would be the state compelling taxpayers, us, to absorb whoever shows up and all of the costs that are associated with that. Hoppe called that forced integration. So that is the opposite of voluntary association. And this is the condition that America and Canada and many of these Western nations have been living under for decades. The left wants open borders, and they want an intact welfare state, and they call this compassion. Right? Rand Paul has introduced 2 bills. He's been tweeting about it, I think, even this morning. One to end welfare access for non-citizens, one to end birthright citizenship. Right, one of these positions is internally consistent. The fact that one of them is considered controversial tells you everything you need to know about where the political consensus is on this one and how far it's drifted from reason. So I've talked about this before on this show. My immigration policy, I call this the bacon cheeseburger policy. You could come here like the Irish came, or the Italians came, or the Vietnamese, Elon Musk. Right, the country they built, that those people built, was worth coming to, because of what those people did after they arrived. They became American. They assimilated. Right? You learn the language. You adopt the creed. You accept the civic framework of self-governance, individual liberty, rule of law, and constitutional government. And you eat the bacon cheeseburger. You eat the bacon cheeseburger because it means you are leaving your culture behind and you are joining a new culture. You're not coming here to occupy a territory, right? And the Ellis Island model in some ways understood this. You had a background check, medical screening, legal entry, and you had to answer certain questions like, are you an anarchist? And if you were, well then, Hans Hermann Hoppe, you're out. I'm sorry, Hans. You have to go home. How about this? And not only do you have to speak English, but you have to speak English with no accent. So Hans. Afuera! Right. So, and then, if you're Elon Musk, we're glad to have you. Right. What the model of the Ellis Island style model had, though, was a pacing of immigration. The rate of arrival had to allow for actual integration and not just geographic co-location of people who share a zip code and nothing else. London is what happens when that pace is abandoned. 30% native English in their own capital. 30% native English in London. So the assimilation step there was not delayed. It was made structurally impossible by the volume of immigrants that were coming in. And what remains of London is a city that they can't even agree on what they are anymore. I think that I read the other day that a majority of London property isn't owned by people in London. It's owned by people in, how do you guys pronounce this stupid name? Qatar? Qatar, Qatar. Let's just call it what it is. Qatar. Qatar. Aussie accent is okay. Listen, I'm just going to be honest. If young, beautiful women want to move to the United States from wherever they are, I say open borders for hotties. Yeah, I don't care what anybody has to say about it. I think that if young, beautiful women want to come, the most valuable thing in the world is young, beautiful, fertile women. I think we need open borders for hotties. I do. I know you're not going to like that, people, but I think the thing is that nobody wants to go to a sausage party. So if the United States was, and I love the joke that people say is that if we had open borders for hot chicks, then white liberal women would form stormtrooper units overnight. They would become. So it's this. Steelberger, yeah, that would help the young men. It would. I mean, think about like all of the Groypers, for example. And I know most of them live in Pakistan and other third world countries. But think about all of the young men in this country that just can't find a girl. If you started bringing in all of these beautiful women, you want to talk about a sea change overnight. You start bringing in beautiful young women, because think about it, for civilizations for thousands of years, what do they do when they conquest? They kill all the men and then they take all the women for their brides. So if we could create a system where 0 to 10, and if you're a 5 or above, then you can have a green card. Nestor Higgins says that, well, women take on new cultures better than men. We're doing it backwards, and we're taking the military age men instead of the marriageable women. Camellia says, you don't have enough strong men to bring them in line, she says. Well, that's the thing, is that if those women come here and they don't find themselves pleased with the men that they have, they can just go back home. So then they'll go back to their home countries. Misha Swisky says, can I then get a hot pool boy named Enrique? I'm sorry, Misha, but no. Enrique has to go home. All of this just to say, though, then that, I think it's okay to change your opinions. The problem is if you ever run for office, or if you ever become a public figure, even on the lowest of low levels like myself, then there is a very strong incentive to never change your opinion about things, because you will be punished for it. If you change your opinion on things, you will pay a price. And the price that you will pay will be the loss of friends. And certainly I've lost a lot of friends, especially in the last few weeks. I posted something yesterday that was, I don't know, it was designed to lose friends. I posted just that you can just trust Trump. And I mean, their libertarians are angry, man. They're posting Thomas Jefferson quotes at me. They're posting John Adams quotes at me. But I've changed my mind. I've changed my mind about things. And I think, it's you pay a price for it, but hopefully, but the thing is that what you don't want is to have a bunch of people who are fake friends, or a bunch of people who wouldn't be your friend if you change your opinions on things. Now, politics is a little bit different, obviously. People supported me because they supported the opinions of things that I held back in 2016 when I was a childless loser running for president of the United States. As every childless loser at 35 years old should do. No, I wasn't a loser. But I was childless. And, with age comes wisdom. With age comes perspective. We're having this conversation about Thomas Massie, for example. And one of the things Massie is saying about his voters is that, well, I got all of the voters who are 25 years old and don't vote. Yeah, you did get all of those voters. And people were blaming boomers and Fox News and obviously AIPAC and Zionists, et cetera, et cetera. But leave out the AIPAC, the Jew-spurging stuff. The idea that libertarians are going to just wait a couple of decades for a generation to die off, and that young people today are going to have the same opinions that they have when they're older, is ludicrous. It's ridiculous. Of course, people aren't going to have the same opinions that they have when they're old, when they do when they're young. It's like that Winston Churchill quote. If you're young and not a liberal, you have no heart. If you're older and you're not a conservative, then you have no brain. I like the joke that if you're older, if you're not a libertarian after that, then you have no heart and no brain. But the point of this is just to say is that people's opinions, they change when they get older. And when if you're like me and you continue to learn things, I know some people stopped learning when they were young. Maybe those people will maintain the exact same opinions they had when they were younger. But if you continue to learn things, your opinions are going to change all the time. And it's about every 10 years that I have a revolution in my thoughts because I like to continue to learn things. And I'm going to change my opinions on things. And that's going to make some people angry. And it's going to make some people hate me. And it's going to make people even stalk me and send me angry hate mail and all that stuff. But I don't care. I got to just do my best. And I'm just going to trust the plan. Trust the plan. Right, Red Pill Prof? If you just tune into the Wake Up America show, guys, good morning. I'm Austin Peterson. Make sure you click that like button. Someone has proposed building 2 gigantic statues, like the Lord of the Rings statues, on the on the Missouri River, in the statues that look like Lewis and Clark. We're going to talk about that with Camellia Peterson when we come back. Don't go away. Head on over to forlibertyshop.com. Check out the 250th anniversary collection. This is the Wake Up America show, and you're watching the For Liberty Network. Yes, sir. "'Tis the year of our Lord, 1801. President Trump Jefferson casts his gaze o'er the sovereign Potomac and beholds a most wretched spectacle upon the waters. From the cursed shores of Tripoli and the welfare coffers of distant Minnesota comes the brazen Captain Ilhan Omar, commanding her fleet of Barbary pirates. She demands her ransom, billions in reparations. Yet one instrument of fortitude suffices, a steaming chalice of Jeffersonian Java, bold and unapologetic from For Liberty Shop. No more tribute to rogues, he thunders, and dispatches the Navy and Marines to smash Omar's fleet asunder. Trump Jefferson stands triumphant as Omar's plunder meets the end it deserved back in Minnesota. Jeffersonian Java, the coffee that gives true Americans the courage to refuse tribute and rebuke fraud. Procure yours at forlibertyshop.com and make America caffeinated again. Spent 8 years making sure nobody knew where he was. Troop movements, secret dispatches. The man was a ghost. So when a barista leaned out a window and asked for his exact location in exchange for points they called stars, he looked at his flag and said, "I've already got my stars. 13 of them." Keep your dignity and your location intact. Grab a box of Washington's Revolutionary Roast at forlibertyshop.com.
Are you tired of the strange radioactive effects of leftist culture? Do you ever wonder what happened to good old-fashioned American values? Well, fear no more, because there's a new force fighting back against the cultural rot of today. Introducing Culturama, a right-of-center talk show that's taking back the future today. Hosted by none other than blonde bombshell herself, Daniela Pensack. She's not just talking, she's taking culture back. With sharp takes, brilliant guests, and a few surprises along the way. Tune in to the live video podcast twice a week, because the future doesn't have to be weird. It can be Culturama.
If
if there wasn't going to be somebody who was a fiery champion of liberty, somebody who would get out there and who would be aggressive, and if they wouldn't do it with more fire or passion than I had, then I would go and I would fight this battle for us. I've fought for the principles that we all share. Parties tend to be secondary to me. We're here because we believe in the principles of liberty. I am not a perfect messenger, but I think I'm a damn good one. This is a replica of our first president's flintlock pistol. You have my full support, my respect, and my gun.
I think that at the heart of my philosophy is much more libertarianism than well, that's the fashionable word these days, I guess. A conservative is no longer just that. He's a libertarian, and always has been.
Yet any time you and I question the schemes of the do-gooders, we're denounced as being against their humanitarian goals. They say we're always against things, we're never for anything.
What is fascism? Fascism is private ownership, private enterprise, but total government control and regulation.
Well, the trouble with our liberal friends is not that they're ignorant. It's just that they know so much that isn't so. If we lose freedom here, there's no place to escape to. This is the last stand on earth. This is the issue of this election. Whether we believe in our capacity for self-government or whether we abandon the American Revolution and confess that a little intellectual elite in a far distant capital can plan our lives for us better than we can plan them ourselves.
Conservative, so-called, is the one that says less government, get off my back, get out of my pocket, and let me have more control of my own destiny.
The left in America tells us not to have kids to save the planet, but in Cuba, they stopped having kids because the state destroyed the earth.
Collectivism doesn't create justice.
Good morning, Rise and Freedom. I'm Austin Peterson. You're watching and listening to the Wake Up America show on the For Liberty Network. Well, somebody went viral with a plan to build two 300-foot statues of Lewis and Clark on the Missouri River in Montana. Why don't they build on the Missouri River here? It got 1.4 million views, and a French foundry is already tossing out quotes to build the thing. Our culture correspondent, Camellia Peterson, is here, and she has thoughts. Good morning, Camellia, and welcome back to the show. It's Thursday, Camellia, which is my favorite, Camellia, because it's almost the weekend.
Right. Good morning from beautiful St. Charles, by the way. I'm in St. Charles, Missouri today.
Oh, St. Charles is gorgeous. Yeah.
Yes. By the way, one bit of news before we get into this. I forgot to tell you this before we started, but our dear friend Kathy Jo Loy has another new grandbaby, and when you talk about like just born in the last 12 hours, I think, and when you talk about conservatives needing to populate the earth and have babies, like I think Kathy Jo and Clint have done their part, and so this is 12 grandchildren for them and one great, so they're doing their part.
No kidding. Well, congratulations, Kathy.
Yeah.
Okay.
So anyway.
So let's talk about these statues, Camellia, because my attention was instantly piqued yesterday when I saw this proposal. Now, I don't know if you've ever seen Lord of the Rings, but there's this famous scene in the movie where they go through these giant statues that are on either side of the river. So this guy named Daniel Green launched this campaign to build 2 300-foot statues of Lewis and Clark along the Missouri River in Montana. It's privately funded, they say. It'll cost $50 million a statue. And now the question is, what's your first reaction?
I mean, I first saw this because our senator was tweeting about it. And so I think first of all, my first reaction is they have the location wrong.
Exactly.
Like,
yeah.
I think that, Missouri is the most logical place for these to be at the confluence of the Mississippi, the Missouri River. Like, this is like, how is this even a question?
I know. Like, who's gonna see it? There's nobody out there in Montana. These
right.
people live here.
So I think it's a wonderful idea, and I love Lord of the Rings. It's one of the few movies that I will actually watch repeat. But yeah, no, I know, right? But I love that it's privately funded. They've got a little ways to go. I think they're only at around $500 right now. So.
Well, but which normally would not really cross my mind to even talk about in a news cycle, but the thing is that I think it does lead to larger questions about how to do great things in society, because
Sure.
Trump wants to have a statuary of all the great Americans, and that is going to be something that is taxpayer funded. I think they're raising a lot of money privately, but in order to maintain it for years, they're going to have taxpayer money kick in at some point. So the question is should the United States be doing more things like this? Is this civilizationally the kind of thing that you do when you're a great society?
I mean, I'm always conflicted about this question because the libertarian part of me is like, no, you don't need to spend taxpayer money on things the question is always, do we spend, taxpayer funds to create beautiful Capitol buildings or things like that? Like Missouri is a beautiful Capitol building. And, we're proud of that, but philosophically, is that the proper role of government? I really am on the fence on this one. There's a part of me that actually believes there is a lot of value in, I know we want our government buildings to be dark and dank and government should be ugly, right?
They should be in a box.
But also, if you think about how your environment affects you, and if you want the people who make the laws of your land that control your lives to work in that environment, can you imagine the product that it's going to come out of that? Because there is nothing inspiring at all to remind them of beauty and goodness where they work to make the laws that govern our lives. So I do think that there is value in the government being a purveyor of beauty, and I know that's been a big deal for Trump, and that is something that I appreciate about him.
Me too, and I actually agree. I think this is a really good conversation because when you look at brutalist architecture, and we have some here in Jefferson City, it's so ugly, it's so dank. Yeah. You look at it and you feel so depressed.
Department of Education in the Federal Department of Education is a brutalist building. It is ugly. I mean, it totally reflects. It just is. Yes.
Yeah. So another reason why I think that it's a good idea is because we spent the better part of a decade watching statues get torn down, and Lewis and Clark monuments have been vandalized in Target. So in some ways, this could be a cultural counteroffensive, right?
Sure. I mean, I do think that there is, we have had over the last, few decades, we have had a pushback against goodness and beauty. And when we talk about, the virtues that make freedom possible, that is a whole other conversation, right? But I think that we've talked about how that you need, a virtuous society. Now, you talk about how you define virtue, right? But that there is a baseline that is necessary for freedom. And I think that, what your environment looks like impacts all of that. I will tell you, Jamie Marie Pope is not going to like that I'm going to say this if she's watching, but Felicity and I were down in Louisiana near Baton Rouge 2 or 3 years ago. And one of the things that you really notice down there, and I think this is a product of the environment, the humidity and everything else, is that there's mold on everything. Like their new Capitol building that for some reason, I think there's corruption involved. Like they set aside their beautiful old Capitol building however many decades ago, right? And they built this Capitol building that is just like, it is boring. It's like tall and straight and like it looks dirty because there's mold on everything. And Felicity was noticing that, people in general, like when you go to Walmart or anything else, they were just like grumpy and always rude. And so it was a really good conversation about how your environment affects your behavior. And so I think it's an important component, when we talk about our national culture as well.
Yeah, I completely agree. So the design calls for these statues to be hollowed out for interior use, like tourism, research, right? So, I mean, that would be like, basically we're talking about building a landmark on the scale of the Statue of Liberty, and we can't even get permits to to build like a house next to a truck stop in this country in a lot of ways, Camellia. So don't you think that Lewis and Clark are going to be declared problematic, and the left is going to do everything they can to stop us from building it? If you know what we should do, Camellia? We should build data centers inside of them.
Oh, hey, I mean, like for real. So this is.
Then they'll never get built.
This is not out of the realm of possibilities, and this is why I say that. I don't know if I talked about it Tuesday or not, but the end of last week I went to Governor Cox's Operation Gigawatt Summit in Utah, and there were tons of people there who are builders and creators and entrepreneurs, and they're the people who are building the nuclear power plants, and they're building the data centers, and they're mining the rare earth minerals, and they're doing all these things. And there was a conversation about when they're building these things that they are an effort to make them aesthetically pleasing and beautiful. Like, so I think that like this is a real thing here. And I think we see increasingly people coming back to realize the value of that.
One of the biggest stories in monument history in the United States is the story of the Crazy Horse Monument, which I don't know if you know much about it, but it's this giant statue of a Native American that they started. They ran out of money for this massive project, and they've only got like the head and his hand. And they have to raise, of course, $100 million to finish this thing. And they rely on private people showing up and touring the hand and the face, but they haven't been able to raise the money for this. So, I mean, the danger is that they start a project like this, Camellia, and then it doesn't finish, and then it becomes something of a blight and an embarrassment to this country in a way.
There is risk in everything, right? I mean, so maybe we should plan well, and maybe we should not start until you have everything. And I think that, that's part of the challenge of this is when you take on any, enormous project like this, you have to sell it, right? You have to let people see the vision of what will be. And so I think that, that's probably the hardest part is getting people to buy in. And here's where our millionaires and billionaires come in, because all of the great things, the buildings, the monuments, things those are largely been funded by philanthropy and the great, builders and entrepreneurs in our country that even the right, so many people love to hate now, right? But there are a lot of people, wealthy people who invest their money into beauty, and we need those people.
Yeah, I agree, because I think we stopped building great things, great infrastructure, great monuments, great public works. Isn't it a sign of a great culture when we actually decide to build great things like this? If we want to live in a great society, then we need, fewer immigrants and more monuments.
So in all seriousness, though, I do think that this is kind of a natural cycle of our industrial revolution in the country, right? Because, the last several decades, the culture has all been about instant gratification, right? I mean, how many times have you heard people the generation of instant gratification, And so there has been this focus on the now, because we had the luxury to be able to focus on the now. So I also think this is something else that we are seeing is we are coming back to people having more of an eye, a generational eye to the future, which is what we've needed for a long time. I was at an event, kind of a legislative wrap-up event last night, and one of the pieces of legislation that passed that we were talking about was what they call a sovereign wealth fund. And basically it's that, the state puts money into a fund that just sits there on the market and earns money, and you cannot touch it. So it's going to take, a long time, right, for this to build up. But once it does, like it will completely eliminate taxes in the state. So that kind of just like really generational forward-thinking vision, I think, is just what we are seeing kind of a resurgence of. And that makes me really happy because.
What do you think would happen if we were to propose today to build Mount Rushmore with the faces of all of those slaveholders? Camellia, do you think that Mount Rushmore could get built today?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, 5 years ago, definitely not. 5 years from now, if we keep on our current trajectory, maybe.
You think we're on the right path, Camellia? You think we're on the right path?
I think that there are still some uncertainties, but yes, I do think I see a lot of hope for the future if we can keep going. Like, there is too much that relies on who is in the Oval Office, right? And I feel terrible every time I think, oh my gosh, okay, so maybe that depends on who's the president next, because it shouldn't, right?
It shouldn't, but
it certainly anymore is a driving force of the direction that we go. But when I look at the people who are up and coming, and I look at the things that we're doing as far as driving innovation in the country right now, I'm hopeful for that. And if we can keep on that same trajectory, I think we're in a good place. I think have had to go through a few years of absolute nonsense to come to our senses that, we can't keep going down the path we've been going.
So what you're saying is that we should just trust President Trump.
Me and Reagan.
Or what you mean is what you meant to say was thank you, President Trump, because let's be honest here, Camellia, is that if we hadn't had President Trump, love him or hate him, we wouldn't be even having this conversation right now.
No, 100%. If we still had, Joe Biden or Kamala Harris or
even a weak Republican.
Sure. Oh yeah. I mean, that's right. I mean, I think that is correct. And that's truly unfortunate. And I know that we've had many, many conversations over the last 12 years, I don't know, however long it's been now since his first term, about the things that, the downside. There are downsides, right? Nobody's perfect. And there are things that he does that I don't like. But, it's all a trade-off, right? Nobody's perfect. And I do think that there are some things that are just so significantly good that, I don't know. It's hard to say if anybody else would have come in and just bull in the china shop, kick the door open.
Yeah, that's the thing is that there's always going to be bad things. There's always a trade-off. Right? But I think that I went from opposing Donald Trump in 2016 to supporting him and making you really mad at me for supporting him, to now you coming along a little bit closer towards my path. You've had a bit of a change in opinion of Donald Trump in the last decade.
Sure. Yeah. I mean,
let's talk about why you were wrong.
Well, I will tell you,
what were you wrong about?
What was I wrong about?
Yeah, let's go back in time.
I think that one of the things, I had a hard time, and it was not just because of Trump himself. I think my difficulty in the beginning was the evangelical right excusing things that they would never excuse in anyone else. And that's still I still don't like that. I think that they betrayed their faith and their values to excuse that publicly, right? I mean, accept anyone for who they are, but don't try to make them something that they're not. And that's actually, as the years have gone by, and I've, really tried to look at things more objectively. That's one of the things I appreciate about Trump, is that there are a lot of things that people want him to be, and they project those things onto him. he is who he is. And, you may want him to be pro-life and everything else, but he's really not, or in a limited sense, right? Not to the extent that most people want him to be. He's not a Christian and a really faith-driven man. He's just not. He's never said that.
Well, shouldn't that make you like him more, being that you are not
I appreciate his honesty about it. You know what I'm saying? Like, I think that he respects that, and I think that he kind of goes along with it. I don't like the people of faith that he's brought into the White House. Like, I think that
he kicked out Carrie Prejean.
Well, yeah, but not Paula White.
Nothing will ever be good enough for you, Camellia. Jeez. Okay.
I will say that, like, when it comes to the faith part of things, I get a little more touchy about that because I think that many good people are taken advantage of by faith leaders who are charlatans, and I could probably rant about that for a long time.
If things were just a little bit different, Camellia, in another version of Camellia, you would be a libturd. So just be careful. Okay, be careful.
I mean, so say we all.
Some people say there's a libertarian to alt-right pipeline, but I also have noticed there's a libertarian to libturd pipeline. So don't follow it.
No worries.
Camellia, I see the pictures that you post of all the fatty foods that you eat, all the pie, all the cake, all the ice cream. So, quick question: are you on Ozempic? I mean, how do you stay so beautiful and thin and pretty and I notice your earlobes aren't drooping or anything like that, but do you have a strong opinion on Mounjaro and Ozempic?
I don't. I don't know. I was telling you that I do have friends who are on Ozempic and, even a doctor, but I sometimes wonder, like, it's not something I would do because I am not that much of a risk taker, but I do wonder if there's an issue with when it comes to dosing. The people I know that are on it that don't look like these pictures you see, right? I mean, they've lost a significant amount of weight, but it has taken time, right? I think that there's a few factors in this. So I do wonder if it's dosing to where, you're doing it at a reasonable rate, but you're 100% right. You have to keep working out with this. You have to lift weights. You have to stay strong. You can't just do it on not eating alone. But I mean, I think that we have seen, and one day science may solve this problem of why some people are more prone to addictive behaviors than others. And it is just harder for some people to, resist things. And I think that you're right. I mean, I think it's character building to do that. I will say that several years ago when I lost some weight, it was intermittent fasting, which is basically calorie control, right? I mean, calories in, calories out, right? I mean, that's really is the bottom line. Is what you intake.
Camellia, be honest. Would you have lost respect for me if I would have gone on Ozempic instead of going to the gym and eating less? Be real. Be honest.
I don't think so. I mean, it would be unusual for you just because
Why do you come on this show and lie to my face?
I am not lying to you. I mean, I don't do that. I mean, that's why we've had deals, that I will, have New Year's resolutions to be nice to you.
Okay, true. Good point, yes.
No, I don't know. Like that, it doesn't bother me, I guess, as much as some people. Like, I think that there are, I don't know. I understand that people are desperate and they're looking for something. And here's the thing too, because we have a whole crunchy right out there that is blaming the government, and they are blaming, all of the food manufacturers and big whatever about, the foods that people have the options to eat. So in a sense, in a lot of ways, they are blaming, big corporations and government for making people fat, but then they also want to say, oh, like, let's not use medicine to undo what they did, right? Too. So I think there's a little bit of hypocrisy with some people there. But I think that, if it's the answer for some people and it turns out to be something that with our obesity epidemic that helps that, I'm not going to knock it too much. I think there's risk with everything, right? Vaccines, no matter what it is.
Would you do it?
Would I do it? No. I mean,
why not?
No. I'm just more risk averse, and I don't, and maybe just because I don't feel the need to, like, right. I know I have the ability to say no to myself. I don't always do that, right? But I know that's my fault. And for me, I have many, many times for years said no to myself. And so I know it's possible and I can do it. So that's, everybody's different, but for me, I know that's an option. So I'm not going to take the medical route.
There you go. Camellia Peterson. She won't take the medical route. She won't take the easy route. She'll take the liberty route, which is the hardest route. Camellia, we appreciate you so much. Hope you have a wonderful weekend. Anything else you want to share real quick or plug before we let you go?
Nope, keep plugging on. We got a busy election year, and so we'll just keep at it.
Thank you, Camellia. We appreciate you very much. Have a
Have
great day,
everyone.
Moonjaro. Welcome to the Wake Up America Show. I'm your host, Austin Peterson. If you enjoyed that conversation, click the like button on your feed or share the feed with someone else by clicking repost. If you click the follow button over on Rumble and you're not following us yet, you'll get a notification when we go live on your Rumble app. This show goes live Mondays through Fridays, 7 to 9 a.m. Central Time. That's the Wake Up America Show schedule. Stephanie, my lovely, smoking hot, redheaded libertarian wife, put together a 250th anniversary collection for you guys. And she's dropping new products this morning like crazy. This morning, she actually put together the Liberty 250 embroidered hat, and I'm going to be ordering that one as soon as the show is over. If you go to forlibertyshop.com this morning, you can see all of the amazing 250th anniversary collection 250th anniversary collection products. This morning, Stephanie just dropped the brand new Liberty 250 hat. So if you'd like to grab a copy of our Liberty 250 embroidered hat, you can certainly do so when you go to forlibertyshop.com. That's the number 4libertyshop.com. Check out all of our amazing 250th anniversary merchandise. And I know Byron Norris is looking at that beautiful hat and wishing that he had one right now. All right, so what's the next topic? Goodness gracious, great balls of fire. Oh, we got Spike Cohen coming up here next. Spike is going to be joining us in just a few minutes. We'll talk about that in just a second. A lot of people are concerned about the future of the United States. They say America feels a little less stable every time you open your phone. Banks, borders, doom scrolling, election chaos. And that's why our sponsor, Expat Money, is offering a free special report called 8 Countries to Escape World War III. I called my buddy Todd the other day, and he's a man, a plan, Canal, Panama. He's living in Panama these days because he wanted to get out. And Panama is one of the 8 countries that Expat Money recommends if you're looking for a plan B. If you want to build a sovereign plan B, then expatmoney.com, our sponsors, have got a free report for you. If you go to expatmoney.com/WW3. That's expatmoney.com/WW3. You can get the free report. Download it for us today. Head on over to expatmoney.com/WW3. Get that free report right now. You guys won't regret it. You're going to find out all of the money, all of the countries that make sense if you're thinking about a plan B, and you won't get stuck if we find a crisis where you're stuck waiting in a TSA line with a backpack full of granola bars and regret. So go to expatmoney.com/WW3. Okay. You like it? Me like. All right. So who's next? The Libertarian Party held its national convention in Grand Rapids this last weekend. New Hampshire got disaffiliated. A delegate got arrested. Some guy did a Nazi salute. The man who was running for the party chair, Jeremy Kaufman, on the platform of dissolving the party, got ejected from the building. I have brought in for you the 2020 LP vice presidential nominee, and he's going to respond to all of it. Spike Cohen, ladies and gentlemen. We'll be right back. This is the Wake Up America Show, and that's on the 4 Liberty Network. Washington spent 8 years making sure nobody knew where he was. Troop movements, secret dispatches. The man was a ghost. So when a barista leaned out a window and asked for his exact location in exchange for points they called stars, he looked at his flag and said, "I've already got my stars. 13 of them. Keep your dignity and your location intact. Grab a box of Washington's Revolutionary Roast at forlibertyshop.com. 'Tis the year of our Lord, 1801. President Trump Jefferson casts his gaze o'er the sovereign Potomac and beholds a most wretched spectacle upon the waters. From the cursed shores of Tripoli and the welfare coffers of distant Minnesota comes the brazen Captain Ilhan Omar, commanding her fleet of Barbary pirates. She demands her ransom, billions in reparations. Yet one instrument of fortitude suffices, a steaming chalice of Jeffersonian Java, bold and unapologetic from For Liberty Shop. No more tribute to rogues, he thunders, and dispatches the Navy and Marines to smash Omar's fleet asunder. Trump Jefferson stands triumphant as Omar's plunder meets the end it deserved back in Minnesota. Jeffersonian Java, the coffee that gives true Americans the courage to refuse tribute and rebuke fraud. Procure yours at forlibertyshop.com and make America caffeinated again.
In a city where businesses never sleep, the technology still crashes. When technology turns criminal, they send up the signal. He's not a myth, and he's definitely not your nephew who knows computers. He installs, he protects, he backs it up. He keeps your business online and out of trouble. Managed IT, security, cloud, support that actually answers the phone. Layer 8 tech. When your network breaks, he wakes. Call Drew before your tech needs a rescue signal.
Are you tired of the strange radioactive effects of leftist culture? Do you ever wonder what happened to good old-fashioned American values? Well, fear no more, because there's a new force fighting back against the cultural rot of today. Introducing Culturama, a right-of-center talk show that's taking back the future today. Hosted by none other than blonde bombshell herself, Daniela Pensack. She's not just talking, she's taking culture back. With sharp takes, brilliant guests, and a few surprises along the way. Tune in to the live video podcast twice a week, because the future doesn't have to be weird. It can be Culturama.
If there wasn't going to be somebody who was a fiery champion of liberty, somebody who would get out there and who would be aggressive, and if they wouldn't do it with more fire or passion than I had, then I would go and I would fight this battle for us. I've fought for the principles that we all share. Parties tend to be secondary to me. We're here because we believe in the principles of liberty. I am not a perfect messenger, but I think I'm a damn good one. This is a replica of our first president's flintlock pistol. You have my full support, my respect, and my gun.
I think that the heart of my philosophy is much more libertarianism than well, that's the fashionable word these days, I guess. A conservative is no longer just that. He's a libertarian and always has been.
Yet any time you and I question the schemes of the do-gooders, we're denounced as being against their humanitarian goals. They say we're always against things, we're never for anything.
What is fascism? Fascism is private ownership, private enterprise, but total government control and regulation.
Well, the trouble with our liberal friends is not that they're ignorant, it's just that they know so much that isn't.
Thanks so much for hanging out with us this morning. This is the Wake Up America Show, and I'm Austin Peterson. We're on the For Liberty Network, and we're glad and thankful to have you here. We have 5 live shows on this network and more to come. Lots of exciting announcements. So make sure that you're following this channel for more updates. Last night, we launched our new show, The Homeschool Workshop, starring Brian Piotr, and we're building solutions-oriented activism around growing the liberty movement, which I think my next guest is really going to love, because that's what his whole career has been about. Spike Cohen is the 2020 Libertarian Party's vice presidential nominee. He's the founder of You Are the Power, which is a nonprofit built around those solutions-oriented activist means. He spent the better part of a decade training candidates, traveling the country, making the case for individual liberty to people who had never heard it made, all while the party he ran on has done its best to make that job very hard for him. The Libertarian National Convention just wrapped. Spike was not there, but he watched the situation for years. Spike, welcome to Wake Up America. Good to see you.
It's good to see you, man. I'm always happy to be on.
Spike, you're like one of 3 libertarians who have not pissed me off. So congratulations.
Yet.
Yeah, no, I'm really proud of the work that you're doing, because whenever I want to introduce my friends to other libertarians who are like non-weirdos, I give them to you, and then only every once in a while do they ever like come back with that picture of you where you're like ripping your hairy chest open. But
we all have our moments.
We all have our moments, exactly. So you weren't in Grand Rapids this last weekend. The LNC voted 15-2 to disaffiliate the Libertarian Party of New Hampshire. Walk us through how we got here and your opinion on that.
Yeah, I mean, I would say the LP New Hampshire and a few of the individuals in the LP New Hampshire orbit, they have a completely different strategy from most of the other affiliates. They're actually intentionally using language that they know is going to upset certain people with the intent that it hopefully pushes them away. And so the rest of the party or most of the rest of the party really doesn't like that. And I mean, a lot of the stuff they've said has been kind of objectively bad stuff that they've said. We'll see if they decided that they didn't want to actually be affiliated with them anymore. And the one thing I've said about this has kind of been a twofold thing. Number one, I think the reason that essentially goofy tweets have made so much attention within the Libertarian Party spaces, there isn't much else that we've been able to talk about. And I've said this over and over again. I don't get asked about this stuff, even though I'm a libertarian and I was on the last, second to last ticket that we had. I don't get asked about it because You Are the Power is doing so much stuff that if I were asked about it, I could quickly say, yeah, I don't really agree with that. Here's all the stuff we've been up to. And I think part of the issue is that a lot of the LP really doesn't have that other thing that they can point to saying, well, this is what we're about. These are the things that we're doing. So I hope that in doing this, they're now moving towards the positive thing they're going to replace it with, because I think the other problem is, this is kind of the second part of it, when we're constantly talking about the things within the party we don't like and we don't agree with, that's the thing people keep seeing. It's the thing they see before they see anything else. So if that's the thing we find most objectionable, why are we talking about it so much?
Well, do you think it was the right move to disaffiliate the LP because of the New Hampshire, because of the antics? I mean, they are kind of the only state party that really seems to accomplish anything, Spike. Was it the right move?
Yeah, I mean, my biggest concern with it, because I'll say, was it the right move or not? Time will tell on that. And this is precisely the reason why I don't do internal LNC races, LP races, because I'm not sure the best way to move forward on a lot of this stuff. And I would say on this one, my biggest concern outside of the specific question of that is if we've now opened the Pandora's box of disaffiliating people, I worry where that goes. Like, what's the threshold there? Now, my understanding is they didn't really get into like the tweets and the things like that. They focused on the fact that they violated bylaws by nominating or endorsing Donald Trump even after Chase Oliver was their candidate. So if they're staying very strict on the bylaws, then I can see maybe that doesn't become an issue. But I will say I'm concerned about like second and third order effects from it. But at the same time, I understand why people didn't want to be associated with it. So I'm sure that's an answer that's going to make everyone at least a little bit angry, but time will tell whether it was the right choice. We'll see. The other thing is, what stops them from continuing to call themselves the Libertarian Party of New Hampshire and continuing to speak on behalf of libertarians in New Hampshire? Again, time will tell on that as well.
Yeah, it's such an odd situation because don't they have to be sued by the LNC if they decide to call themselves that? Are we going to get into I don't know. Are we going to have an intellectual property battle between libertarians, Spike?
And honestly, I don't know. It may very well be. I assume they're not going to. I mean, just knowing them and how they've acted in general, I can't imagine they're going to go, oh, well, you disaffiliated us. I guess we'll stop calling ourselves libertarians. I don't know what happens next. And so does that become they get to keep the Libertarian Party name, and so whatever affiliate replaces them doesn't get to call themselves the Libertarian Party? Or are there going to be two Libertarian parties of New Hampshire, and one's the affiliated one and one's the non-affiliated? I don't know. And I don't know the answer to that. There might be a clean answer, but I don't know it.
Now, Jeremy Kaufman, he's been on this show a lot. He and I have kind of been bros lately, and people, which has been driving people insane, which is another reason why I've been having so much fun with it. But Jeremy Kaufman, he ran for party chair on a single issue platform, dissolved the Libertarian Party entirely, for which I endorsed him. He got 31 votes. Is he wrong, though, that like the brand itself is toxic? And, you know, if I had a brand that was a part of my network and it was doing damage to the other brands on the network, I would just cut it off, cut it loose, and get rid of it. What are your thoughts on Jeremy Kaufman's proposal to abolish the Libertarian Party?
Yeah, I don't support abolishing the party. I understand the frustration. I would be interested to hear his definition of toxic and negative. But I would say in general that, like, I mean, here, put it this way, I can speak for myself on this. I'm still part of the Libertarian Party. I still support the Libertarian Party. 98% of what I do has little to nothing to do with the Libertarian Party at this point. It has a role, which I believe its role is and should be to contest elections and run candidates for office. I think when we're doing activism, and I know there's a lot of people that disagree with me on this, I think when we're doing activism, we shouldn't do it as part of the party. We should do it adjacent to or outside of the party, like what I'm doing with You Are the Power, what you're doing with this show, and what you're doing with the what you were talking about with the homeschool thing that you're introducing, and the For Liberty Network and all of this. I think we do these things outside of and adjacent to the party. You don't see Republicans and Democrats using their party for their conservative or progressive or nationalist activism. They do activism, and then through that activism, they then attract people to potentially to candidates that line up with the activism they do outside of the party. And I think that's probably the best model moving forward. I think when you use a party, you introduce a partisanship that doesn't need to be there when you're trying to get people to understand your ideas.
Now Kaufman's argument is that the provocations that he engages in is effective because he grew the Libertarian Party's social media following from a few thousand to over 100,000. You know, is reach online a legitimate measure of a movement's success, or do you think that's a substitute for it?
It's a measure. It's not the measure. I would say if we're judging a political party, it's how many of your candidates, either your run candidates or your endorsed candidates, were you able to get elected, and how responsible were you for that? And those aren't always the easiest metrics to point at. But I mean, for example, you could have someone running for office that gets millions of followers. And I mean, Kanye West, he was one of the most spoken about candidates in 2020. He got like 70,000 votes. Like he wasn't even on most of the state ballots. That in and of itself is not a good enough measure. It is a measure, though. And I think there, on the flip side of that, there are people that don't see the potential for that reach. Again, at You Are the Power, we use our social media reach, but we use it to an end. If we were to just say we have X number of followers and X amount of reach, but we weren't able to show the positive legislative changes and positive outcomes we've been able to affect as a result of that, then that would just mean that we were popular. It wouldn't mean that we had actually, or that people want to look at what we're doing. It didn't mean we were actually effective in what we were doing.
Spike,
in and of itself.
Spike, what were your thoughts on the loss of Congressman Thomas Massie in the primary to Ed Gallrein a couple weeks ago?
It was pretty, I mean, I'm disappointed, not surprised, but disappointed. And it's frustrating that you have a candidate who is basically the I would say the Ron Paul of our generation. He's the one who reliably says, we're not going to, I'm not going to support increasing the size of government. I'm not going to support increasing the debt. I'm not going to support reductions to our privacy and increases of encroachment on our liberty and our freedoms. And I'm not saying he's perfect or anything like that, but he certainly, I would say far more often than not, we on the liberty sphere would agree with him. And it's frustrating that it's like we don't even get to have one of them in Congress now. And so, yeah, it's a very frustrating thing. And like I said, I wish I was surprised. I think we're at the stage now where if you want to have any involvement in the Republican Party, you literally can never disagree with Donald Trump. And it's increasingly becoming, not only can you not disagree with him, you have to be the most sycophantic towards him if you're in a primary race. You have to go over and above your competitors to say how much more you agree with Donald Trump than the rest of them. And so when you have someone who says, yeah, I support him when he's right and I don't support him when he's wrong, which is what we should want out of a politician, is someone who calls balls and strikes, whether or not we agree with them, for that not to be tolerated. It's very unfortunate.
See, I have a little bit of a different take on that one, because I know that Massey had opposed Trump in the past and had still won his re-election resoundingly. Now some of his votes, whether it's the big beautiful bill or a few other things that he pushed back on him, fine. That's his libertarian stand on things. But the problem that I had was that, and you can call this a guilt by association fallacy if you will, but the people who had surrounded him towards the end of his, I guess, career in Congress in the last year were some of the worst people in politics. If you disagreed with Thomas Massey teaming up with Ro Khanna on the Epstein files, then they would call you a pedophile defender and a Jew. And what I noticed, Spike, was that in my local Republican Party, I'm always kind of like polling them on libertarian issues and kind of like just asking them questions to sort of get an idea for how, like, normie Republicans feel about us, freaks and all of that. And the thing that I realized was that it was one thing for Massey to disagree with the president on the one big beautiful bill. Maybe he would have still held a seat in Congress, but that he had gathered around himself people like Candace Owens and Tucker Carlson and this guy who was wearing the Nazi shirt that he said he was functionally illiterate, couldn't even spell his own name, and that this was the coalition that he had built. And in other words, he had sort of like used the Epstein files as leverage against the administration. And maybe he didn't call Trump a pedophile. He called them the Epstein administration. But that a series of blunders with the Epstein files is really what in large part led to his downfall. Do you think that it was wise for him to sort of hitch his star to, the Epstein transparency stuff? Or do you think that that was a strategic mistake?
I think that the Epstein transparency part was the correct and both morally and I don't know if it was the right political choice. Maybe it wasn't, but there are times where the right ethical choice isn't the right political choice. When you're talking about specifically the people he was surrounding himself with, I don't know outside of and I say this as someone that's online more than I should be, I don't know how much that affected the cohort of people that came out in droves to vote for Ed Galrain, or Galrain, however you say it, who, I mean, when you look at the demographics breakdown, I think if anything, when you see that the youngest people were the most likely to support Thomas Massey, and once you got past like 55 to 60, that was when you started seeing double digit support for Ed. And those are the people who, I mean, for better or worse, those are the ones who tend to show up in the midterms. I'm not sure that those, maybe I'm wrong, but I'm not sure that those people from 55 to like 80 were clued in with what was going on X and on social media as much as someone that was in their, anywhere from mid to late 20s to, like our age.
Spike, I'd like to talk to you, rather than specific policy and specific politics, perhaps, well, maybe specific policy here. I'd like to get into sort of the weeds, if you don't mind, on libertarian philosophy, because sure. I've had something of a sea change in my opinions in regards to a couple of the major issues that libertarians love to discuss, which is foreign policy and immigration. I used to be more of like the Cato Institute style libertarian when it came to immigration, but over the years I've been increasingly swayed more by the Hans Hermann Hoppe view when it comes to immigration, of the government as sort of trustee of all of these goods and services that taxpayers create, where illegal immigrants come to the United States and take advantage of this property that we all collectively own, whether we agree with that or not. And that these people, if they want to come to the United States, should have to have some form of sponsorship or some form of insurance. Where do you come down on the immigration debate? More Cato Institute, more Hans Hermann Hoppe, closed borders, open borders? Like, what are your thoughts on that issue?
Yeah, I mean, I think we alternate between two very two things that no one's actually saying they want, like the public's not actually saying they want. When you get Democrats in office, you see this almost taxpayer-funded importation of people, like people literally being brought here in planes. Well, that's not even open borders. That's government taxpayer underwritten sponsoring of bringing people here, and I don't think anyone's supporting that. Certainly no one in the general public, and I wouldn't say very many libertarians are supporting that. And then on the other side, you end up with where you see these like provocations of ICE going into, basically for almost political reasons, going into major cities and not really engaging in deportations as much as like almost like these like city level provocations that are happening without a lot of deportation numbers behind it and without a lot of criminals being deported. So I don't think either one of those I would support. I would say, first of all, if you're looking at immigration broadly, either eliminating the welfare state or at the very least limiting the welfare state to people who are actual citizens here would do away with a lot of both the concern and the actual reality of people coming here to get benefits. I think if you ended the wars of choice that are happening and the involvement of the U.S. government in other governments, like the sponsoring of cartels and things like that, that cause violence in other countries, that lead people to leave that country to go somewhere more stable. And I think also if you got rid of, for example, like what we were talking about, the importation, the taxpayer-funded importation of people here, I think you end up with a much lowered public temperature and also a much lower demand for people that are coming here. I mean, most people don't leave unless they are typically really desperate to leave and to go somewhere else and are driven to do better when they get there. Absent any other type of involvement, that's usually what brings people here. And that's, I mean, on both sides of my family, I'm the descendant of people that came here for a better life. On my mom's side of the family in like the 17th century, and on my father's side of the family in the late 19th century, but it was the same thing. So I'm certainly not against immigration, but I do think we should be getting rid of some of the things that are either subsidizing people coming here or forcing people to leave where they're going to find somewhere else.
Okay, we could discuss that for an hour, and I don't want to get there.
Oh yeah,
but I would like to address one other policy thing. One of the things that I think is starting to separate me from perhaps maybe what libertarianism is become in the United States, because I know it's been largely taken over by Rothbardianism and the anti-war view of libertarianism, but I'm becoming far less anti-war. If anything, I look at war more neutrally than I used to. I used to consider myself something of an anti-war person, but now I kind of look at, when someone tells me they're anti-war, I sort of feel the same way about that as when someone tells me that they're anti-gun. It's sort of a position which is kind of a utopian view that there isn't going to be, that we can live in a world where there are no guns, or we could live in a world where there is no war. I think everybody would like there to be fewer wars. Nobody wants babies to be blown up. But, under a libertarian view of the non-aggression principle, you would say, well, who's committing an act of aggression? But I mean, at all times, in every sense of the word, our naps are constantly being violated, Spike. And so the question becomes, at what point can you actually fight back? And what I have discovered is that there seems to never be any legitimate case for a self-defense that involves war making if there's a possibility there might be a civilian casualty at any point in time, or else you're a neocon warmongering statist to most of these people, Spike. But the way that I look at war is that war is something that occurs sometimes as a necessary evil. Yes, I said it, necessary evil, because wars can be fought in self-defense, and not all wars have been fought in self-defense. But there seems to be like this belief that amongst libertarians that, and this is like kind of the Ron Paul playbook, is that if we just left other people alone, that they wouldn't attack us so much. But Spike, that has never been the case throughout history, that if you just leave violent barbarians alone, that they will leave you alone. As a matter of fact, American history proves this to be true, not just because the United States has been imperial fascistic warmongers, but because Thomas Jefferson was very anti-war until all of a sudden he had to kill him some Barbary pirates. So we've been having to fight the Mohammedans, as they called them, for all 250 years of our history. So isn't there a problem or something of a naivete? I mean, if China's sending spies here, is that not an act of war? If Russia is meddling in our elections, is that not an act of war? Isn't this sort of default anti-war position somewhat nonsensical as much as liberals when they say they're anti-gun, Spike? Can you see my point in what I'm trying to make here?
I see your point, and there was also a lot of different parts of this. So let me try to unpack each of those. So the first thing, kind of a broader view, is the reality is that war at scale is going to involve a lot of civilian deaths. It's going to cause a lot of second and third order effects, that externalities that are going long after the war is over. You're still going to see like a lot of devastation besides just obviously the deaths of the people that die right then. You're going to see increases in disease, and you're going to see more poverty and starvation and things like that. So for that and many, many other reasons, I believe that, and it doesn't sound like we necessarily disagree on this, but I'll just go ahead and say it. If it is a necessary evil, or to whatever extent it is a necessary evil, it is an evil, and it's something that we should try at whatever means possible to try to make the absolute last thing that we do, especially as war becomes more of a life and death thing for humanity, right? So we're no longer fighting with muskets. We're no longer fighting with swords and spears. We're now fighting potentially with weapons that could take out entire chunks of the planet and leave it irradiated for, hundreds of generations, or potentially, make us extinct. And so we have to really be careful with this kind of stuff. I would say in general, I mean, you give the Barbary Wars as an example. I would say that was an example of a war that was both just and carried out correctly. They went through the actual process for an authorization of use of force, and then they did a targeted action against the people that did this. They didn't then create this massive complex to justify a multi-decade occupation of that region or anything like that. They went in, they did what they needed to do, and they fought to an agreeable armistice and a surrender, and then it was over. And I think that that's actually probably a pretty decent model for how things should be done. I don't think Iran is an example of that. And I wouldn't say in general that any of the wars that we've engaged in my lifetime have been an example of that. And I would say that, if you go far enough down a lot of these rabbit holes, they were very often an act of aggression by our government, or a sort of wag the dog situation where where it was a terror group or a dictator who was either currently or previously sponsored by the U.S. government, who for whatever reason then went south on us, and now we're cleaning up that mess that was created. So I wouldn't say. I guess I think there's two different ways to look at this.
Yeah, there is.
I think
you said two specific concepts when you talked about like the Barbary Wars. You said first that it was just, and then also that it was carried out correctly. And I think that, unfortunately, the laws have changed since World War II. We now have the United Nations, and we're a signatory to all of these treaties. So we don't live under the same war theories that we did in the 1700s, where the President of the United States had to, get authorization from Congress to do this. We now have the War Powers Act. But the most important thing is not, in my mind, because I think libertarians are too focused on processes rather than outcomes. And we sort of trust the process, but unfortunately the process never seems to work. Or they'll say, oh, we're just not using the proper processes, but the outcome is the really important thing. But what you said up front is the most important thing, that it was just. And that is the most important thing, not the processes that you go through, but the most important thing. It's good to have libertarian processes. It's good to follow the Constitution when it comes to war. We can't really do that so much anymore, unfortunately, because we've signed all of these treaties, and now we need permission from Brussels to engage in war making. But that the most important thing is that it is just, that it is the right thing to do. So I guess my concern is that whether it's Justin Amash or Thomas Amassi or Ron Paul or Rand Paul or any of the great leaders of libertarianism right now, is that we are so focused on libertarian processes that we're willing to lose libertarian outcomes because like, for example, it was important for us to have a transparency process for Jeffrey Epstein. So we went through these processes. Well, the outcome was that we lost Thomas Massie. But I mean, from a broader strategic perspective, I wouldn't have traded Thomas Massie for the Epstein transparency files. If I had to lose the Epstein transparency spike, I think the greater evil was losing Thomas Massie. But some people, they treat the process, the transparency is more important than the outcome. Well, the outcome was we didn't get very many people named. They named a few people that weren't even involved in that, and we lost Thomas Massie. So it's kind of like strategically we're making wrong decisions, it feels.
I wouldn't say we lost Massie because of Epstein transparency, but I want to go back to what we were actually talking about on the war thing. When we talk about the process, at least I can only speak for myself, I'm not saying the process is what makes it good. The process informs whether it can be done justly in the first place or not, because that process wasn't just set up so we could check boxes and follow Robert's Rules of Order. It was done to make sure that we don't go off into some capricious war that shouldn't have happened. In a similar way, we don't say that, oh, it was just that a murderer was brought to justice because they got a warrant first. We don't say that, but we do say that it's good that they have to get a warrant first because that protects those of us who didn't commit murder from having the justice system wrongly used against us. So no, I am a believer that if there are processes that are in place that have been proven to be able to prevent the kind of more adventurism that we often see now, that's a good thing. And it's not for nothing. The founders warned against the very kinds of entangling alliances that we are in right now. I mean, the kinds of being signatories to a bunch of different treaties, that's ultimately what led to World War I, and World War II being an extension of World War I, like that entire thing, and ultimately the Cold War in some ways being an extension of that. A lot of that
I agree.
I
think I agree, but the problem is that the founding fathers often said one thing and then did something entirely different as soon as they got in power. Thomas Jefferson was a perfect example of that. So I mean, my concern is just that libertarians are so focused on processes that they think the process is the morality versus the outcome. And you're right. You know, the warrant is not what makes it just. It would be just even, you know, to grab the bad guy, even if they didn't get a warrant. But yes, they put these processes in place. But I think that unfortunately, because of the post-World War II order that we have created and the Geneva Conventions and the treaties that the United States passed, that we now live in many ways in a post-constitutional order, and libertarians are banging the drum. Go back to the Constitution. Go back to the Constitution. But in some ways, we live in an anarcho-tyranny, and I think Jeremy Kaufman actually stated this very well. We don't really live there. There really is no rule of law in the United States. There's no rule of law because if any judge or any idiot on a jury can just decide what they want the law to be or interpret what the law is, then you're just subject to whatever is the average or median IQ of the guy who lives in your community or some woke leftist DEI judge. So what the Trump movement is about in some ways is kind of a radical pragmatism that says, yeah, we live in an anarcho-tyranny and we're going to take power and we're going to set things right. And that means we're going to break laws. We're going to break norms because the norms that we're living under were written by the people who hate us and want us dead. Spike, it's 9 a.m. and I've abused your time, and thank you for being so generous with it. We're going to see each other this summer at Freedom Fest. You're going to be there with We Are the Power. You're going to have a booth. What you got cooking up?
Oh, we don't just have a booth. We actually have our own room this year. We're going to have something called the You Are the Power Action Center. So very often people come to these events. We talk about all these great ideas. We have arguments about, whether or not we should abandon the Constitution. But then we walk away, right? We have these great conversations. We say, we'll see you next year. And what are we doing in the meantime? And so what we're actually going to do is we're going to talk about what we've been doing. And then we're actually going to have people join us at the Action Center and do the things, actually do actual activism right there on causes that we are working on right now at that time, and get people onboarded into actually taking action to take all these great ideas we talk about and put them into action, actually helping people save their homes from eminent domain, save their families from being torn apart by abuse of child protective services, getting charges dropped against people that never did anything wrong, and getting corrupt officials to resign, and all the other incredible stuff we do. We're going to do it right there at Freedom Fest. And if you use the code SPIKE100, you get $100 off of your Freedom Fest pass.
There we go, Spike. Hey, you're the man, Spike. And everybody's saying I need to have you on more often. So expect Brian's inbox to get filled up with requests to join us. I'll see you in Las Vegas, Spike. Thank you very much.
Absolutely, man. Thank you. Have a good night.
Thank you very much. Yeah, good morning. This is a great show today, great conversation, and you can only hear these kinds of conversations right here on the Wake Up America show. You're not going to hear them anywhere else. So that means you better come back tomorrow morning. What is today? Thursday? Okay. That means Cafecito Libre later today with Mylene Salabaria. She is the Cubanita. Will be live today at 3 p.m. Central Time right here on the For Liberty Network. So make sure you're following Cafecito Libre. And then at 7 p.m. tonight, we've got Culturama. She's Marilyn Monroe with a master's degree. Where can you find all of these shows? Well, go to wakeupAmericaShow.com this morning. You'll find the links to all of our shows. You'll see what we're building here on the For Liberty Network. Appreciate you guys. Thank you, T-Mill22. Thank you, Joni Rankin. Thank you, Camellia, for joining us today. BB for Liberty, Red Pill Prof, Nestor Higgins, Not a Real Libertarian, Jennifer Halbein, and all of our other friends in the For Liberty Network. Hope you guys have a wonderful day, and we'll see you again right back again here tomorrow. Exit through the Grift Shop. Head to forlibertyshop.com, guys. Get yourself a Liberty 250 trucker cap. The Liberty 250 snapback hat. Remember, that price includes shipping, so it's actually a little cheaper. And you can also save a little money if you do that spin to win that pops up. We'll see you guys tomorrow here on the Wake Up America show, and that's on the For Liberty Network.
The year of our Lord, 1801. President Trump Jefferson casts his gaze o'er the sovereign Potomac and beholds a most wretched spectacle upon the waters. From the cursed shores of Tripoli and the welfare coffers of distant Minnesota comes the brazen Captain Ilhan Omar, commanding her fleet of Barbary pirates. She demands her ransom, billions in reparations. Yet one instrument of fortitude suffices, a steaming chalice of Jeffersonian Java, bold and unapologetic from For Liberty Shop. No more tribute to rogues, he thunders, and dispatches the Navy and Marines to smash Omar's fleet asunder. Trump Jefferson stands triumphant as Omar's plunder meets the end it deserved back in Minnesota. Jeffersonian Java, the coffee that gives true Americans the courage to refuse tribute and rebuke fraud. Procure yours at forlibertyshop.com and make